This is the second installment in my beginner's guide to War of Rights. If you missed the first one, I'll put the link at the end of the video and in the description. But this video is meant to be short and prescriptive, so I'm just going to tell you what I think you ought to do. And what I'll do in subsequent videos is I'll take each one of these parts and I'll explain kind of when they work and some of the qualifications to what I'm going to say. But I promised you quick tips, so let's go ahead and get into it. First off, your default stance when you spawn in, if you can, like at the beginning of a round, you should get your load, you should put your BAO on. That's known as full kits. So if you hear people say full kits, they're talking about BAO on, get your load. And then I would tell you, go into melee mode. So some people will say V for victory or Virginia or Vermont, whatever it is, hit that V button. It's probably going to be the best all-comers kit for those of you who are just joining the game. Second, only kneel when you're told to by your CO. Again, this is for beginners. If you actually know when it's good to kneel, you don't need any of this advice. But more harm is going to be done by someone who doesn't know when to kneel than not. So just stay standing, stay in formation, all that good stuff. Third, when volleying, try to aim for your mirror image in the opposing line. Brief explanation. Everybody tends to aim at the center of the line because they know if they miss left or right, they're still going to hit something. And so what frequently happens, and listen for this, when you receive a volley, somebody will get shot 2-3 times. And in War of Rights, one shot to the foot is good enough to knock you out. So 2 and 3 shots is overkill. And so you want to spread out your good shooting along the length of the opposing line. Fourth, when you join a firing line, spawning from flag or running from spawn, feel free to form a second rank on the flanks of those lines. Some people look down on a second rank, but the people at the very end of the line, even if they're playing it tight and close to everybody, sometimes they'll still be in skirmishing. And so if you form just in front of or just behind them, you're now adding more friendlies in the vicinity. They need to remain in formation, and you're going to help them do that. Fifth, and it kind of bleeds into the sixth point, but be a good meat shield. If the flag is standing behind you, what everybody knows is that everybody aims for the flag because people aim for the flag because they assume friendlies, their enemies, are standing around it. And so if the friendly flag plants their feet behind them, people run away because they don't want to get shot. They really want to shoot. The problem is your team needs that flag more than you need to finish your reload. And so you got to stand there. You got to take the hit for the flag. Somebody else hopefully will do the same, and then you'll get to spawn back in and hopefully get a chance to shoot that gun. Similarly, when you're receiving a charge, be the meat shield for your officer without obstructing their ability to shoot, but they can gun down potentially 6 and some officers more than that with just their one round from the revolver. So again, your team needs that officer shooting. You can die in melee. It's fine. If you just spawn in on flag and you see that allies are almost done reloading, you can stand in front of them and take the bullet because they just need to live maybe 5 more seconds before they can shoot, whereas you need to survive an entire reload, aim, and fire cycle, which might be 25 seconds or longer. This is the related part. When you're charging into melee, the less combat effective you are, the closer to the front of the charge you need to be. So if you have your bayonet off, you ought to be towards the front because you're less combat effective than people who have it on. People at the front generally are understood to be the ones who get shot and frequently won't make it into melee. If you have your load in, then you should be towards the back of the line because you're going to be able to shoot after the kind of front of the line eats the enemy's lead. If you have your BAO on and your load, and say your load is buck and ball, you are highly effective. You should not be at the front of that line. You stop to shoot, the enemy is almost certainly going to shoot you down. You want to be at the back of the line. You want to be part of the cleanup crew that makes sure your side wins that charge. You are the most combat effective, so you ought to be the last ones in. Seventh, when charging, as long as you are not like the last person in your column, stab and go, club and go is the rule. The reason is you don't want to stop, because if you stop and you got 50 guys behind you, they all now have to go around you. You're more likely to team kill. It takes 2 stabs to kill somebody. You stab and then try to push through the enemy's lines and get a stab in the second rank, third rank, something like that. And additionally, what I've noticed is that when you stab and go, the enemies in those front lines turn around to try to stab you, rather than worrying about, the 35 guys on your team who are bearing down on them. They really want that kill, and they're going to give up their backs to everyone just to try to finish you off. So stab and go is the way to go, unless you are the actual last person in line, in which case feel free to clean up as you can. 8. When you charge into melee, avoid the temptation to break off on your own and try to hit that group from the back. I see people do this all the time, particularly now that we are getting even larger server pops, and it didn't work on the smaller servers, so it's not really going to work now at all, but they think it's like really cool and really helpful to take a really circuitous route to like drop the flag or drop the officer. Meanwhile, they've taken themselves out of the fight for a long period of time. Their friendlies are probably all dead by the time they get there, so they're certainly going to die out of line, at best skirmishing. They're not able to keep friendlies in formation longer because they've removed their presence, and whatever damage they do to the enemy is likely going to be killing 1 or 2 people who are in formation. It's not going to be worth the ticket trade. Also, don't break off and go melee a separate group. Right? Stay with your group. As bad as the charge is, just go in, die in formation, and come back and try again later if the first time didn't work. If you're receiving a charge, you may hear brace, brace right, spear wall left, brace the fence. What most of that is telling you is simply that melee is imminent or it's already underway. And then it's from the line's direction. So if the line was facing south, melee right means, or brace right, means that if you were facing south before, you now have to look to your right in order to deal with that melee. If you hear spear wall specifically refers to standing shoulder to shoulder. Bayo's on and in melee mode. It's kind of like a single line Greek phalanx, if you know what I'm talking about. You can do that if you have time. A lot of times you might not have that amount of time, but that's the idea of a spear wall. And then bracing the fence, bracing the wall, what you should do, it's really helpful on defense. If you are behind a wall or a fence and you're receiving the charge, you want to be back a couple of yards. You want to be back far enough. As a rule of thumb, if you can't stab the wall or fence, then you can't be stabbed through it. And you want to be back far enough. Ideally, you're shooting as you're receiving the charge, and then you're continuing to reload until you are in melee or just about in melee. And what you want to do is you want to put the attackers in that interaction on, you want to give them a difficult choice. Either they come up and over, and if you see them start the up and over animation, break your reload, just hit R. You should be back in melee mode if you're in melee mode this whole time. And then you, and maybe you and a friend, you can stab them, they can be dead before their feet hit the ground, and you shouldn't take any damage. If they simply stand there, since you've already shot and you're in your reload cycle, you're going to finish their reload before they do, assuming that they don't have their loads, and then you can shoot them at 5 yards distance. So that's, I think, one of the more effective tactics, and one of the things you got to get used to. You'll see people, you'll hear them talk about fence dancing, and they're trying to stab someone, an enemy, right through the fence, through the wall. It tends to be a 50-50 interaction, which is generally what attackers want. As good defenders, you got to be more disciplined than that. You got to force them into a series of bad decisions, and you do that by stepping back from the fence. All right, those are the tips. And in subsequent videos, we will get into kind of some of the times these aren't true, some of the qualifications, the circumstances, and then we also have some more in-depth guides coming your way on particular parts of War of Rights.